Today, I am here in Salem, Oregon with Brian, and this man just cannot stop starting new businesses. Today, I am here at his restaurant here in Salem called Basil and Board. What does Basil and Board do, Brian?
Basil and Board is a kind of a mishmash of things, but Italian pizzeria is what we call ourselves. Italian pizzeria and wine cafe.
Okay.
And so we try to pair those two things together.
Okay. And this is not the only restaurant that you own, correct?
It's not. I've got some partners in Bone Vine, which is we've got 4 locations. Well, 3 locations, a food truck, and a 4th on the way. And then Turner Pizza with some other partners down in Turner.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is 4 locations with the Bow and Vine. Do you have any more Basil and Board locations, or
Just the one.
This is the one,
Mm-hmm.
and then Turner Pizza.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So do you have any other businesses besides restaurants?
Mm-hmm.
What are those?
So I have a web development company called Tippy Media, and
Okay.
been around for going on a long time. I can get into more of that later. I got fired from a job and started that the same day.
Oh, okay.
Had that for a long time. I've got Caligo, which is a design company for soccer balls, soccer gear, focused on that, and have other partners in that. And then I recently just sold a business that was a SaaS app called the RSVP app, which is like an event management system that we built a long time ago. So that one's gone, but yeah, there's a couple more businesses maybe the next year or two that I'm working on with some other partners that hopefully will spin up here in Salem, but we'll see. They've been challenging, but I think we found a way forward.
How do you manage that many businesses?
Well, for me, it's finding partners that I really enjoy working with that have expertise in those specific fields. And it's like a relationship. I mean, it's like a marriage in some ways. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of clarifying expectations from day one. There's check-ins, making sure that not only are we communicating, but that we're staying in our own lane. And that's tough for me, especially, and my other partners will probably attest to that. But just kind of knowing what your role is in a business and making sure that your expertise is focused on that role and not trying to veer too much into anybody else's, and then really trusting the people that you're partnered with. What I've found is there's kind of 3 key roles in any business. And so when I'm looking to start something new, I'm looking for not only where I fit in those 3 roles, but where are those other 2. And if there's too much similarity, then it's probably not going to be a good long-term partnership.
Oh, okay.
And I got that from this book called The E-Myth that I
Okay.
read a long time ago. And there's really, the key roles are you've got an entrepreneur, a manager, and a technician. And those 3 wirings or personalities are different, but there's also a lot of overlap and tension that exists among the 3 of them. And you just got to understand how those 3 work together. Now, it doesn't always mean that there has to be 3 people in a business. The first business I started was just me. So I was all 3 roles. And I think a lot of people feel that when they're starting something new is I've got to be the guy cleaning the toilets, the guy calling, people up, and the guy that's executing on the plan. And I get that. But as I've been able to develop more businesses, I've understood that the only way to scale the way that I'd like to scale is to find people smarter than me and skilled in things that I have either no interest in or just not wired for.
Right.
So that's kind of how all of these businesses have been able to grow independent from me, is because I have great people that have been much smarter and capable to help contribute in those roles.
Yeah. We talked to Rick Saffiels.
Oh yeah.
And he talked about the same thing. Like, his business was really, really stifled, he felt like, until he found people around him that could do a lot of the work that he was doing. He found out that he was the bottleneck for his own business. I've also heard that. I have never partnered with anybody in business, but from what I hear, if you are going to find somebody that does something that you don't partner up with somebody that does exactly the same thing as you,
Right.
because that's just butting heads. Can you attest to that?
Oh, for sure. Well, I think it depends on the business too. I mean, if you are, so for example, in my web development business, we have projects that require coders and developers, and sometimes one developer is not enough for the projects that we have. So we might need two of the same skill set working on different pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Or maybe in a landscaping business or something where you're all kind of working together on the same thing. Sometimes I think that can be helpful, but when you're talking about specifically 3 key roles, I think they have to be very different personalities that are going to look at the business from very different perspectives, and hopefully together, collaboratively, you're able to grow it.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a business relationship where you really butted heads and it just turned out that, hey, you know what, we can't do business together? Like, either you take the business or I'll take the business, and you had to part ways?
Well, I think, so the first thing to say is there's conflict in every relationship.
Right.
And I have 10 partners between the various businesses. So there's bound to be conflict.
Right.
I think as we have built trust among the different relationships, conflict rises, but it comes out of a place of a willingness at the end of the day to figure it out together.
Right.
Because if, parting ways, it's kind of like a divorce. Divorce is an expensive proposition.
Right.
And in the same way, separating a partnership, especially when you're growing something, can be not only expensive but daunting and complicated, and it may be the thing that kills the business. And at the end of the day, I think we have these conflicts, we build the trust, we have respect for each other, but we say, you know what, I'm going to defer to you, or you're going to defer to me, and we're just going to agree to disagree, or we're going to find a solution together that we can both get buy-in on.
Right.
So there is that aspect. So yeah, conflict not all the time. I've been very fortunate with the partnerships that I've had, but there have been times. I mean, there's a partner in one business that it wasn't me specifically, but a couple. The partnership group as a whole. There was just, we could not find a way forward together. And that partner, I think, ultimately agreed as well. There was too much. And so that partner stepped away, and the business continued with the other partners.
Gotcha.
And that was kind of a bummer, but that's the first time I had that experience in a decade of different businesses.
So the web development was the first business that you started. And you said you started that the same day that you got fired.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about the events that surrounds that, because that sounds interesting.
Yeah, so it was a little bit, that was, partly my fault and partly their fault as far as the business that I got let go of.
Were you working for somebody else doing web development?
No, so I started back in high school. I got really interested in computers and design, and so I worked at Kinko's.
Okay.
And it's now called FedEx Office, I think. But at the time it was Kinko's. And it was fine. I was in high school, whatever. But we kept having people come into Kinko's asking about doing website work or graphic design work or stuff like that. And Kinko's had that, but they weren't really set up for it. And I really wasn't supposed to be doing this, but I said, if you contact me, I will try to help you figure this out. And so I started helping these Kinko customers build these horrible websites, but they would pay me, a few $100. And as a kid in high school, that's 2, 3, 4 days working at Kinko's for these websites. And I was really enjoying it. And then I just got leads from there. And so sort of built this little business where I didn't have to work at Kinko's anymore. That kind of covered my expenses as a high school kid. I'm a lot, but it did enough for me. And I enjoyed doing it. And so moving into college, I continued that and was able to build a portfolio that I could then show to people and gain traction and trust. And little by little got bigger and bigger projects. And that happened all the way through college. And so I had this business, and I had some roommates who were also graphic designers. And so we kind of started this thing. So I had a good thing going for a while. And then I moved to Arizona to finish up at Arizona State. And during that time was able to connect with some people for some new projects. And one of those people was interested in bringing me on full time to work on, they wanted to expand their nonprofit client base. And I kind of specialized in nonprofit organizations with my
Okay.
my website company,
Oh,
and I thought, well, that sounds great because I feel like I've been, barely scraping by for a while, living paycheck to paycheck doing this. Even though I enjoy it, I was getting exhausted about kind of the hunt all the
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
And I think I had just gotten married. It was 2007, just gotten married. And I thought, well, some consistency and some reliability and de-risking a little bit feels nice going into this new chapter of my life. And so I essentially sold my portion of the previous business to my partners. And when I say sold, no illusions of grandeur there. It was maybe like an inkjet printer and $500 or something. Like it was not significant. But that kind of was dissolving anyway. It was fine. We had a lot of fun doing it. So I jumped onto this company, and within 6 months, I was let go, and it was
Oh, wow.
it was really uncomfortable. It was I had the cardboard, but like some of my friends work there, and the day that I got let go, I walked in that morning, and there was just a weird vibe. And everybody was quiet. Like some of the guys were gone. There was no eye contact. I was like, what's going on? Somebody getting let go,
Yeah.
And then the owners called me downstairs, and they sat me at a table. They said, we have to let you go. You have to sign this as a release, and we'll pay you a severance. And said, okay. So I grabbed my box, and luckily my wife was working at the time in another place, but I drove over there. I was like, I got fired today. Here we go. Here's this thing. Part of the clause that I signed was non-compete, which meant that I couldn't reach out. So I had essentially built this database of clients before they hired me and brought that database in, and they were saying that you couldn't contact those people anymore, which I did immediately. And so that day, that afternoon, I violated my non-compete clause, which Arizona they threatened some things, and I had to talk to a lawyer. But basically, Arizona is a right to work state, which means that they can't deny you the ability to earn a living doing the thing that you do.
Right.
And so it wasn't. I violated it, yeah, but it's kind of a gray area. So I contacted immediately people because I had to figure this out, and that's when I started Tippy Media, and that's the same business that I have today that still produces probably the majority of our earning income.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And to be honest, I fell out of love with it a long time ago. This particular business, but because of what it provides, have stuck with it, and just kind of I've gone through cycles of burnout with this business, and refresh or change direction, or just dealing with all of those things, but also extremely grateful that it has been there for as long as it has.
Yeah. So you just do restaurants for fun then, or what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Restaurants are, well, it depends on who you ask. At first, it sounded fun. I think when people start restaurants, they imagine this. And it's funny because when I told people that I was part of starting Bow and Vine, that was the first restaurant. People were just, it's like the most exciting thing in the world. Like people want to hear all about it, and like you almost feel like you're like a local celebrity in some way starting this thing. And the reality is it's the worst margins, the highest risk. Not the highest risk, but there's a lot of risk in it, a lot of margin. It's exhausting. You're dealing with people all the time that you have to, it's hospitality industry. So you're serving people constantly, and, and the churn within this industry is difficult. The last 4 years have not made it any easier. And so I say that we started restaurants for fun, and they are in some ways, but I can see why people, restaurants close. It's not usually like, yeah, we sold it and what a great experience we had and we're moving on to the next thing. The story is usually we just got burned out. We couldn't do it anymore. And we're done. And it just kind of dissolves. And I understand where that comes from. So this is probably, of all the businesses, restaurants are for sure the most challenging. But I've been really fortunate that the partners that I've been able to work with are really good at restaurants and are used to this churn and risk. And so from the outside, I'm new to this, and I'm kind of panicking sometimes and like, what's going on? I'm not used to all that. But it is fun. It is
Yep.
fun for sure. I stay in the brand, the design, creation part, which I really enjoy.
Oh, okay.
Not the day-to-day operations. And that's part of how I'm able to do so much is I'm not really involved in the day-to-day of most of the things that I'm part of.
Will nobody else hire you to design stuff? You have to start your own businesses to design stuff, or
I
what?
guess I want to be able to have control,
Just kidding.
you know? I'm not a very good designer. I'm not a good developer. I gave up website development years and years ago and have not looked
Okay.
back. I don't enjoy doing social media. I don't enjoy
Yeah.
doing design for the most part.
Yeah.
It's funny because that's kind of what my wheelhouse is, and
Yeah.
I just fell out of love with it. But
Yeah. Would you say that like avoiding burnout, the best thing that you did was having those partners on board? Or
oh, for sure, none of this would be here without the partners I have.
okay.
I was not capable of doing that on my own. I knew that going into it.
Yeah.
With the businesses that I have for sure. But there's also a little second guessing. So there's imposter syndrome in my experience for sure, and never feeling like I'm good enough or capable
Yeah.
of doing anything on my own. Sometimes that gets in the way.
Yeah.
Sometimes I bring in more resources than are needed to do something.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm just already convinced I can't do this by myself.
Gotcha.
And so that's something I've struggled with and working, trying to shift my mentality and thinking, well, what is reasonable that I can do that I won't get burned out, that I would enjoy. But the reality is that running restaurants or this level of complexity and moving parts, you really do need a few people in the room
Yeah.
looking at different things. Otherwise, there's no way
Yeah.
could do this without getting burned out.
To somebody that struggles with imposter syndrome, what would you say is the best way to get over that?
Continue to do the thing that you're doing. A good example for me personally is recently I turned 43 this
Okay.
past year, and I've always wanted to get into the gym and see what I could do if I just put some effort into it.
Okay.
Right? Consistently.
Right.
In nutrition and paying attention. I've never done that before. I've just kind of taken it for granted because I was involved in sports and stuff. So you go into the gym, or I go into the gym, and it's really intimidating. I don't feel like I belong there. All of these people, they know I don't even know how the equipment works, right? I don't know where it is, how it works, anything. But I step into this environment feeling extremely intimidated by all these people that have been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
And that you can see and tell that they have been doing it for a while.
Yep.
And so in that environment, I had to make a decision that like, this is going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to feel out of place, but I'm just going to keep showing up. And so every day I show up and I learn how the machines work. I learn where things are and I become more comfortable over time. And once I'm able to get those things out of the way, then I'm able to kind of, focus on the bigger things that I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of imposter syndrome is it's not that you fake it till you make it, although sometimes that can be true. It's just that you show up and you show up with the willingness to say, I'm probably going to be terrible at this. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I'm going to make an effort. Like this is the path forward. I'm going to chip away at this thing. And that's the chip away is kind of my mantra.
Yeah.
As far as like, what can I get done today? What is the smallest possible thing that moves me in this direction? And if it's nothing, can I forgive myself for that?
Yeah.
So imposter syndrome, especially when I first got started and I was younger, man,
How old were you when you started Tippy?
I was 27.
27. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And man, was it that long ago? So 16 years.
Wow.
Anyway, I'm going to process that later.
Write that down.
Right. So 16
To talk to
years.
therapist about.
Yeah. What am I doing? So 16 years ago. Yeah. So when I first started, I had, I was like, I got to get the magazines like Wired and Fast Company and Entrepreneur, and I'm going to get these things and I'm going to sit there and read them because that's what you do. And
Yeah.
it was kind of the equivalent of social media for me. Like I would read about all these 30 under 30 and these successful people, and all that did was make me feel depressed and
Really?
just a loser. Like what am I doing with my life? I'm not accomplishing enough. I'm comparing myself to people that have been chipping away at this for a long time and saying that we're apples to apples.
Yeah.
Right. And we're
Yep.
not. But I would feel those things. So that was a challenge, and it still is. I just kind of like, have you ever heard like comparison is the enemy of joy or the thief of joy?
Yeah. Yep.
It's kind of like that with social media too, and I still experience that. And so my challenge is to try to block out all the noise and just kind of focus on what can I chip away at today,
Right.
and realize that, yeah, I am an imposter, but so is everyone else.
Yep.
Because nobody goes into any business or into any skill set or into the gym day one knowing everything,
Right.
and being in perfect shape. That's why they're there. So I have to, but it's a mental gymnastics that I have to do, week to week.
Yeah, I think it can be like a humility thing too. If people criticize your work or criticize where you are at, first of all, if somebody is where you want to be, they're not going to criticize you for where you're at currently, right? If you're making that effort to be there. Also, if people criticize you, I was talking to Rick about this, like, don't be a poser. Admit it. Like,
Right.
I don't know anything about going to the gym, but I'm still going to go to the gym.
Sure.
I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
I don't know why we think we have to know everything, or like everybody feels a little bit self-conscious about, starting something new and like being the guy that makes all the mistakes like that. That's not appealing to a lot of us. But at the same time, like I think that it's okay to just admit, yeah, I don't know anything, but I want to. I'm going to figure this out.
100%.
So, yeah. So you went to college.
I did.
Did you graduate?
I did.
For what?
Business management.
Okay.
It's the equivalent of saying I have no idea what I want to do.
I have heard people say that those are the classes that you take when you don't want to study.
You go to Arizona State if you don't want to study. So,
Okay.
so
No.
I guess I had a double. Yeah. It only took me 7 years to get my 4-year degree. So that
Okay.
was great.
Why? Why did that take you 7 years?
Because believe it or not, I was not aware that I had to take certain classes to get a degree.
Oh, okay.
So when I graduated high school, I thought, oh, we'll go to college. I'm gonna pick. I had like Beatles anthology class and psychology, and I had no idea that there was a core that you started with, and no idea that there were classes you had to focus on.
Yeah,
So I'm just
yeah.
kind of like, I don't know. So it took me 7 years, and I went to 3 community colleges and 2 universities.
Okay.
Yeah.
So somebody with an entrepreneurial, like a tendency to, like they want to go start some. They think they want to go start some. Would you recommend going to college?
Man, that is such a loaded topic right now. I am assuming that my kids will not go to college,
Okay.
which sounds weird. I can't assume that all of them won't, but I have 2 for sure that have that entrepreneurial spirit. And I have experienced, having gone to different universities and getting my degree and stuff, and going into that much debt, the only benefit that I got from college was a bubble of time
Okay.
and protection to explore a little bit more about who I was and what I wanted to do. So that student debt allowed me to not have to get a job, which allowed me to be able to focus in on the business, the web development business, which then put me in a totally different trajectory that I continued past college. The idea of putting together a resume and showing it to somebody is just, it's up there with cold calling for me. Like it just creates this pit in my stomach. I don't ever want to be subject to other people's opinions to be the thing between me and a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I know that's, you could make the argument, well, as an entrepreneur, aren't you doing that anyway? Like, yes, you always have a customer, you always have a client. But the fact that I had to sell myself to somebody who's in a hiring office and just kind of be in a pool of maybe 1,000 people, or going on monster.com and applying for jobs, just sounded like the worst thing for me.
Yeah.
And I never wanted to be in that position. As far as college goes, I think that there is a place for college for sure.
Okay.
Especially when you're talking about going into very specific industries that require a lot of study and
Right.
schooling. Business, maybe not so much. If you're starting your own thing, you're going to go on your own trajectory. I'm not sure how much college is going to help person to person with that. I can guarantee you're going to go into debt, and that's going to follow you. In fact, I just paid off my student debt last year.
Really?
Yeah.
So you were 42 when you paid off your student debt.
Mhm. And that was not because I still had several years left.
Oh, okay.
I just made the decision that I am done paying for student debt, and I'm
Right.
just going to pay it off.
Right.
And it felt amazing. It was not the smartest move, but it felt good. But that was just kind of a reminder to me, I don't want to put my kids in a position where they're not only not educated in how to get educated, if that makes sense. So
Right.
going into college, hey, this is what you need to do
Yeah.
if you want to get out of here as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on your debt. And what is the return on this investment? Because essentially that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
subsidized investment from the government for you to go to school. What's your return on that?
Yeah.
And is it above the subsidized percentage, 3.25%, whatever it is percent? So you do a little math problem there and kind of figure that out. But I don't know. If I had to do it over again, I would have done 2 years at just a local college as cheap as possible,
Okay.
and then kind of explored from there.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have taken a year off and kind of just had the freedom to go and just kind of scratch the itch of I don't know what I want to do, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I still feel like I don't know what I want to do, and I'm 43, so still figuring that out. So I don't know if I would have known that, at 18, 19 either, but just being able to not have so much pressure and have some flexibility to just kind of I just don't know.
Why do you think that isn't promoted more? You're 18 years old, getting out of high school. Why aren't people saying, look, take a year or two and have 3 different jobs and explore how you relate to other people, maybe a few different industries, and then at that point make a decision to go to college or not? Because I never went to college. I didn't even finish high school. But from what I hear other people say, and maybe this isn't even correct, but it seems like there's a lot of pressure that's put on high school kids to sign up for college right out of high school. And I just think that it would do a lot of people a lot of good. This is me in my opinion, to just take a year and to have a job, figure life out a little bit, and at that point make a decision on what they want to get educated in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think people are saying that, but I think that the path, the institutional path for school, and I can't speak into private school, because I never went to private school, but for public school, the institutional path, I think, is that you do elementary school, then you do junior high, then you do high school, then you do college.
Yeah.
And after college, you get a degree. And, that's kind of the traditional path that I think everybody understands.
Right.
They don't know that there are so many other options out there. And institutionally, I don't know that there's really an incentive for colleges to say, you don't need to go to college. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think that narrative has been changing. I was listening to a podcast recently about this conversation and how it's becoming a bigger narrative, especially with as expensive as colleges are becoming.
Right.
And are you really getting the return? You're going into debt hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some degrees. Are you getting that back? Or how long is it going to delay you in life to see a return on that?
Yeah.
To just get to zero again with this degree, could be years.
How would you recommend people educate themselves if they're not going to go to college? Let's just say they want to start a business, and you said, they might need an education. Part of that education is about learning things or getting educated on how to get educated, right? So how would you recommend people learn if they're not going to college?
Oh man. Well, when I was growing up, I didn't have YouTube. I didn't have, the internet was kind of just getting started in terms of resources.
Okay.
And learning. And now, there are so many resources out there. I'm not saying go to YouTube and that replaces college, but sometimes. I've learned a tremendous amount on YouTube.
Before I got my degree.
Yeah, YouTube. Man, I got my master's in YouTube. But I would suggest that there is a lot of new pathways for learning online.
Okay.
Not necessarily, I mean, you have online universities, but I'm talking more about specific industries or skill sets that you're trying to figure out.
Yep.
And even figuring those things out at a low cost where you can kind of dip your toe out and
Okay.
not fully commit to a semester's worth of, cost and time. Maybe you're able to kind of explore that. I think also you need to really understand currently your wiring. Who you are, what things cause you a lot of stress. Are you willing to push through those things? For example, if you need to start a business and one of those requirements is you've got to go out and meet with people to build trust and to gain business, but you're not a people person. Like I'm an extroverted introvert, so I don't enjoy going out shaking hands and kissing babies. That just burns me out. But other people do. And if you don't have that person in the room, you have to really do some soul searching to say, is this the kind of thing that I can do and feel comfortable with? Am I willing to put myself out there? And so I think that not only do you need a little bit of just education, and there's a lot of different places you can get that, but just knowing yourself. And where am I going to thrive? Because if you're doing something that's just going to exhausting for you, you're not going to stay with it. And you need to know that ahead of time. And I'm not saying that personalities can't change. I'm certainly different than I was when I was 18. I've learned a lot, grown a lot. But there are certain things about me that stay consistent. And I think people just need to kind of revisit who they are, in new seasons and say, is this something I still love? Does this fire me up? And if not, is it something that I need to push through for the sake of my business, my livelihood, my goals? Or is it something I say, you know what, I'm done with this? And, saying no is probably one of the most powerful words, I think, in the English language. Being able to create boundaries, really understand who you are and say, that's not for me, or I'm not interested in that, or I'm going to create a boundary here, or I'm not going to continue down this path anymore. It's a powerful thing to do. It's also extremely scary sometimes. And people don't like to hear no. But people can respect no, eventually. Or if they don't, they're not in your life anymore.
That's interesting that you say that, because I recently heard a session about setting boundaries and stuff like that. So I was doing some work for free, some video work for free for a few people, and my life is extremely busy right now. And so part of my homework for this session that I heard on boundaries was for 48 hours, you have to say no. Just say, if you don't feel like it, or if it's going to inconvenience you in any way, say no. Like, even be selfish with it. Right? So I was like, okay, well, there's these two people that I'm doing video work for free, and it's too much. Like, I have to say no. So I wrote out like this list of an outline for my conversation, called the first person, like, I can't do this for free. Like, it's just too much. I can't justify spending this much time and just doing it for free. And she said, well, I kind of wondered, like, she was very happy with the work that I did for her, and she's like, I don't know why you're not charging for this, honestly. And we're willing to pay. I was just kind of taken aback. I was, okay. And then the second person, I think, was actually relieved, because I think on his mind he was inconveniencing me. And so I had a wonderful experience with setting boundaries in the recent past. So I think that's a very, very good point. One thing that I did want to get back to is you said a couple of your kids have this entrepreneurial spirit. Did you teach them that, or is that something that you're born with?
I think it's kind of both and. I think sometimes you can nurture certain personalities within your kids that you identify without forcing them in a direction that maybe they're not comfortable going. So my oldest is a type A personality, just like me. She's a go-getter. She started her own business on Etsy.
How old is she?
She's 13.
Nice.
Yes, but she started it when she was 11.
Really?
And she just, I want to do this, and I want to explore. So I think she's a naturally wired person for curiosity, and I want to have control over my environment. So a lot of entrepreneurs are kind of like that. I have no problem starting something, no fear, no intimidation. I mean, she does, but it's kind of, she just goes for it, right?
Good.
And so, for her, I identified those things. I said, well, let me know if you need help, or here's some things I've learned, and kind of helping her figure that out. But I don't want to assume that all of my kids are going to be these business entrepreneurs and whatever. They need to be who they're going to be.
Yeah.
And every one of them is very different, which is crazy to me. I don't know how you grow up in a household and everybody's completely opposite of each other. But it makes for a lot of fun. And so, as a dad and as, my wife, we kind of look at each kid individually and say, well, how are they wired? What really fires them up? Rather than saying, you need to go do this or you need to go do that. We're also trying to teach them boundaries and how to say no.
Yeah.
One of the most influential books I've read is called Essentialism. And it's written by an author. His name's Greg McCowan. And the big overarching theme of that book is say yes to the great things. Well, the way he says it is say no to the good things. And there are a lot of good things.
Right.
Say no to the good things so that you can say yes to the great things.
Gotcha.
And so helping our kids identify what are the good things in your life. Oh, that's a good thing. For sure. Does it get in the way of the great things? Are you saying yes to good things and having to say no to great things?
Right.
How do you kind of identify those things? It's not easy, but the practice of being mindful of that is helpful.
Huh. That's really good. Do you let him play video games?
My son loves. He's really into basketball right now.
Okay.
And I've found that connecting with him. So it's difficult for me. My personality is I'm not all business, but it's hard for me to not have a purpose in what I'm doing. Gotcha. And understanding the why behind it.
Right.
And for a lot of years, I missed out on the why with my son because I was having trouble getting down to his level, playing the way that he wanted to play. I wanted him to play the way I wanted to play, what was more comfortable for me. What I realized was I was missing out on a lot of opportunity to connect and show him how I love him. Right. Video games are kind of something that he really enjoys doing and something that I could get on board with and do too. And so, we'll play Mario or Mario Kart, or he's really into NBA 2K right now. And I'm terrible at it. I hit all the buttons. I'm the player that's like in the corner of the court, jumping up and down, not even looking at the ball or the game. But he loves it. He just wants to do something with me, and video games for him are a way that we can connect. And so I'm like, yeah, buddy, let's do that. Yeah. So he does. My other two, not so much. They sometimes, but they're more. They got other stuff. They like to do more girly stuff. And,
So video games, you're pro video games as long as there's a purpose behind it.
Well, the purpose is kind of what I make it to be. For me, the purpose is connecting with my son. We don't do any violent games or anything where we feel like the content's inappropriate, but we'll sit there and it's just play. I'm playing, and he's very playful. And say, okay, this is how we're playing right now.
Yeah. You set time limits on that?
Yeah. We have so Nintendo's got all the Switch has all the controls on it where you can limit it to whatever it is. But we just kind of sit down and say, well, we'll do this for a little bit, and then we'll go do something else.
Yeah. I loved video games.
Yeah.
My dad was not a big fan.
Okay.
And so I don't think I've ever told this story on the podcast, but when I was probably 12 or 13 years old, I bought a PlayStation, the original PlayStation. It was old at that point. I think the PlayStation 3 was out, but I just found the original PlayStation at a garage sale.
Okay.
I bought some games on eBay, and we didn't have a TV at our house either, so on junk day in that town where we lived, which is a day where everybody can take their old appliances or whatever and just stick it at the curb, and the city takes care of it, picks it up, throws it away.
Sure.
Disposes of it like you're supposed to. There was an old TV that somebody left out. And this was one of those that's probably 30 inches wide and 30 inches tall and probably about 30 inches
Okay, so
long.
it's a tube that weighed 300 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I had my little gaming setup, and my dad came to me one day and said, how much money do you have invested in all of that? Because I would go out there to play hockey, I would play football, Crash Bandicoot, several other games, golf. But he's like, I don't like how much time you're spending out there. How much money do you have invested in that? I said, it was around $75 because everything was cheap at that point.
Yeah, especially a TV on the curb.
Yeah. And he's like, I will pay you $75 if you get rid of all of it. I said, deal. And ever since then, I mean, I've had some games on my computer and on my phone here and there. They kind of come and go. But ever since then, like, I've never really been big into gaming since then. And anyway, it's just kind of interesting for me to hear people that take incentive and start something, have an entrepreneurial spirit, their thoughts on video games. Because obviously it's a very prevalent thing. And if somebody is thinking about going down the entrepreneurial path, I just like to ask these questions so maybe they can get some ideas on how they can relate to video games, whether they use them or don't use them.
Well, what's interesting about video games, and this may be coming from a dad entrepreneur thing, is that I noticed there's a lot of problem solving that happens along the way in games. And not necessarily like, I mean, every game you're trying to figure things out, you know, but you can do it without a lot of violence too.
Right.
And for us, you know, he's solving puzzles and he has ADHD.
Okay.
And so for him to sit down and focus on something and solve problems and just play, I think for his brain, he's connecting the dots. You know, his brain's firing and all of a sudden he's focused in on something. And it's fun for both of us. Yeah. And so I haven't found really an issue with games. Now that could change. Right. You know, he could become somebody that's like just in front of the screen all the time. And I'm like, it's probably too much. Right. You know, but even in business, you know, you can focus on one thing for too long. And just because you're in a business doesn't mean that it's any better than sitting. Right. You know, and maybe it's a reprieve. Maybe playing games for you is the way that you just kind of I don't want to think about anything else for a while. Yeah. I just want to focus on this one thing and have fun and relax. And so.
Yeah. I never thought about being addicted to business as the same as being addicted to video games, but there's probably very many similarities there.
My wife told me I struggled with finding I still struggle with finding hobbies.
Okay.
And I said, I don't have any hobbies. And she said, you're starting businesses is your hobby. Okay. It's the thing that you spend the most time enjoying and doing. And if you had, you know, let's say you had like run this mental exercise, if you had $1 million, what would you do? Would you do anything differently? Or I guess nowadays it'd be like $2 million because of inflation. But you had all this money, you didn't have to worry about anything anymore. What would you do? And to me, it's like I would just start new things. Yeah. Because I enjoy it so much, even with the challenges.
You just can't stop.
I mean, I can stop. And restaurants have certainly, I've been like, okay, I think I'm done with that.
I just think of some of the big events that I've been at. I've been on the dishwashing crew. Yeah. I just think of late at night, sitting there scrubbing dishes, and people leaving, you know, half of their mashed potatoes and gravy on there, and oily, you know, your fingers just have this film on them by the time you're done. And I look at the restaurant business and I'm like, no thanks. Yeah. I look at that and it doesn't even appeal to me at all.
I get that sentiment, and when we hire people, we try not to paint that picture for them. But for sure, it's not an easy industry. Yeah, for sure, and it's just getting harder.
What % of the business when you started Tippy Media or when you started one of your restaurants? I guess what I'm trying to get at, a question that I wanted to ask is, a lot of people that I think they want to start something, or they're thinking about starting something, but it just doesn't feel right at the time, maybe, or it just looks way too big, way too hard, and like some big insurmountable mountains in front of them. Mm-hmm. What percent of the business when you started them would you say went easy or fell into place or just felt right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it made sense, but I was also ignorant to the challenges. Okay. I was focused more on the idea that something new could be created, and I didn't think about all of the complexities and things that it would take to get there. And in a lot of ways, that's good, because if I had, maybe I wouldn't have gone down that path.
Right.
I have a partner that he gets intimidated by the details, and
Okay.
so when we have a problem to solve, the way I look at the problem is like, well, you just do this, 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 and this, which my wife loves.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
kidding. She hates that. Just oversimplify everything.
Okay.
But in my mind, I am
Yeah.
able to get from point A to point B fairly quickly,
Yeah.
and that's not always great. But one of my partners has the opposite problem, and so I use this analogy as tying your shoes. For me, or for most people, it's like you just tie your shoes and you're done. For him, it would be the equivalent of, well, you got to take one lace and then you got to pull it over, and then you got to put it through and loop it around. Then you got to pull it again. Then you got to do the same thing with the other loop, and then you got to do it all over again on the other foot. It's like that. There's no way.
Right.
You know, but for us, tying a shoe is like you just tie your shoe. You don't even think twice about it.
Right.
You just tie your shoe. And that's how I think about problems sometimes in starting businesses. Oh, you just do this. Like
Right.
what could go wrong? You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those are two maybe opposite spectrums, and somewhere in the middle is a reasonable person that says there's challenges, but we can overcome them.
Right.
And being more aware of what those challenges are.
Yeah.
And so when you're starting out in business, or when I was starting out in business, all I was thinking about, some of it was desperation with Tipping Media. I just had to do something.
Right.
And some of it is the excitement of creating something new, like the restaurants. I didn't think about all of the details of scrubbing pots and, you know, late at night, or when somebody calls in sick and you have to be the person that replaces them.
Oh, yeah.
None of that stuff really occurred to me in the moment. It's just the excitement of creating something new.
Yeah.
And so that has its benefits, but also I think the more I've done this, I'm becoming more aware of the challenges and more sensitive to them to make sure that the next thing that starts considers maybe some of those things, but doesn't get in the way of the ultimate goal of starting something.
Yeah. How many of those challenges do you think somebody should know before they start a business?
Well, I think first, go back to know who you are, know what your role is.
Right.
And then, sometimes it's helpful to work with somebody that has some experience that you trust in the business world, and say, well, here are the kind of the key components you need to think about, the big things like accounting and bookkeeping. Are you somebody who's going to want to manage your books and transactions and things? If not, you may want to hand that off, or you may want to get familiar with it. Or how about just general day-to-day operations? What are the things that you think are going to be required to do this? And are you available and gifted, or can learn and are willing to learn these things, these particular, parts of it?
Yeah.
And if you can start to answer yes to, more questions than you're saying no to, then maybe this is something worth pursuing.
Yeah.
But if from the day one, it's like, well, you got to cold call people, and that's how you thrive in this business, then I'm out. That's not me. I'm done. Unless there's a partner that I come alongside and they're like, I thrive on cold calls. This is what I want to do all day long. I'm like, perfect. You do that and I'll do this. And it's funny, one of the first conversations, so there's a business that I'm working on with some partners right now, and it's taken about a year so far, still working on it.
Okay.
And one of the first conversations, he invited me to lunch, and he said, I want to do this thing. Here are the things that I love to do.
Oh, yeah.
And it was dealing with people and dealing with day-to-day operations and this stuff. And I said, awesome, because I hate all of that. And he said, here are the things I don't want to do. And I said, well, that's all the stuff that I like to do.
Yeah.
And so from day one, it was kind of like, well, there may be something more to talk about here. And I think you got to be really honest with yourself, but also honest about what's required in that business.
Yeah. So somebody that doesn't have a business now, would you recommend going and finding a partner to take care of some of that stuff? Or if you have no money, no resources, anything like that?
You do have resources. You have time.
Okay.
Which is huge.
Right.
And if you can figure out how to leverage that to build something, you're already ahead of the game.
Okay.
You have to identify what resources are required, time, skill, or money. really, those are the three key things. Well, I don't have any money, but I do have time and a little bit of skill. Great. You're 2/3 the way there already. Who has the money that you need? Well, my family will loan me, or the bank will loan me, or we can pull some out of savings, or it's only going to take X amount, and I can save that up in 6 months, and then I'll have the money, the time, and I can work on the skill.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I'm willing to do all those things. But if you're saying, you know what, I have time, and I need the money now, and I have the skill, well, maybe you're bringing in a partner that says, listen, I'm going to invest in you. I don't want to have any part of the day-to-day operations, but I'll bring the money in. I just want to see a reasonable return, or maybe no return, friends and family kind of thing. And you're off and running. So you identify those three key areas.
Yeah, it's good. What was family life like for you? Did you have siblings or?
Yeah, I have a brother and a sister.
Okay.
I'm about 11 years separated from my brother.
Oh, wow.
And 14 from my sister.
Wow.
So we moved around. I've moved probably 20 times in my life.
All in Oregon, or are you moving?
All over the place.
Okay.
All over the U.S. And a lot of those moves were without siblings. So
Okay.
I grew up as an only child, or treated mentality, everything, kind of an only child, until I was 11. But by then you're kind of used to the only child vibe.
Right.
And moving a lot definitely had its challenges. Being separated that many years from your siblings has its own set of challenges, because I'm married with kids and a mortgage, and my brother and sister are graduating college or just kind of getting started, and so we love each other, but the relationship that we have is not necessarily relatable in some ways. So day to day, there's not a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I'm really struggling with the kids this week, or and they're like, well, I don't have any kids, so I have a dog, and they're pretty cool, but so I do have siblings.
Okay. You said that you played sports. What sports did you play?
I played soccer and track.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was I played soccer through college. I played at Arizona State, but
Oh, really?
but they don't have an official men's team that's funded by the school, because of the time it was Title IX. I think it's probably still a Title IX thing, but I played on the closest equivalent. So we played all the other schools, and we traveled and stuff, and that was a lot of fun.
Do you think the sports world, or playing sports? I never did any of that, like organized sports. The school I went to didn't have a sports program or anything like that. Do you think playing sports and being involved in something like that helped with any of your, the business side of things? Is there any lessons that you learned in sports that help you today?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. At the time, I probably wasn't like, oh, this will be a great learning lesson for a new business.
Right.
But being in a sport where you're working together for a collective goal, and you're overcoming challenges, and there's relational things on the field, and on and off the field, and you're trying to figure out how can you be on a team moving toward this goal and just can't stand this person, or maybe I'm the person they can't stand, and working together despite that to move something forward. I think it's really beneficial, realizing what you can and can't do in terms of your body, and that most of it is a mental game, to be honest, unless you're injured. But your body gives out long before your mind does.
Yeah.
And so being able to push through those things and decide, like, I'm capable of this, and I'm just going to decide to do it.
Yeah.
That's a specific personality type.
Yeah.
It's one that my wife and I are very different in, where I see challenges as things to overcome, and my wife sometimes sees challenges as a reason to stop.
Okay.
And that's common. That's not taking anything away from my wife. She has a whole other personality and skill set that makes our family function.
Yeah.
But I come at things very differently, and I think personality-wise, I can't assume that everybody just looks at obstacles as things to overcome. And certainly in business, if you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're wired in a way that, you're a people pleaser, and challenges feel overwhelming no matter what the size is, and you just don't have the mentality to say I'm going to overcome this no matter what, which in business can sometimes be really valuable, because if it were easy, everybody would be doing it,
Right.
kind of thing, you know.
Right. You mentioned a little bit about this, and I wanted to touch on it again. It sounds like you're working out on a regular
It sounds
basis.
like it. It doesn't look like it, but it sounds like it.
Are you doing that on a regular basis
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you do any like manifesting or meditating or anything like that?
No, but I think, being mindful is something that I really struggle with. I think part
Okay.
of it is because of how I'm wired, just type A.
Yeah.
My mind is always kind of bouncing around and trying to figure things out.
Okay.
And so to be mindful is a struggle. It's almost painful.
Do you have problems sleeping or no?
No, I have no problem sleeping.
Can you take naps during the day?
I can,
Okay.
but I tend not to. Just the way that I organize my day is,
Yeah.
I have this neon sign in my office that says retire often.
Okay.
And because I changed my mentality on what retirement looks like for me, I've decided that retirement is a very different definition for me than it is for other people. So when it comes to taking naps, I think for me, like yesterday, I went on a hike and I just
Okay.
went to Silver Falls for,
Oh, nice.
yeah, and just did the whole 7-mile loop, threw some earbuds in and just kind of made a day of it. And
Yeah.
for me, that's a nap in some ways.
Okay.
It's a way to just kind of relax and just let my mind wander and just do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I retired for a minute, but no, I don't really do naps.
The working out part, are you doing that for like mental reasons, is it just basically getting better physical shape, maybe better health? Why exactly did you decide to exercise every day,
Yeah, there's
or
a
on
lot.
or on a regular basis?
There's a lot wrapped into it. Some of it's selfishness, some of it's vanity.
Okay.
Some of it is actually what kickstarted it was I did this DNA test. It
Okay.
was like 23andMe or something. And one of the things that it said on there is in terms of muscle makeup, you have an athletic build.
Okay.
And I looked in the mirror and I said, 23andMe, I need my money back because I don't know what DNA they got. But then I thought, I wonder if it's just that I have not focused on this thing. And
Okay. Yeah.
I said 43. I said, what would it take for me to kind of see what that would look like if I really took care of myself and committed to this?
Yeah.
And going back to the intimidation part, I don't know a lot about exercise.
Okay.
I'm like, oh, you just lift heavy weights and you get swole, which I'm
Right.
not really trying to
Right.
get swole, but I just want to feel good. So I found this app, and the app would tell me, for a type A person like me, it's telling me, it's pushing you every day. It's telling you how many reps, what your weight is, how the exercise, where to go, creates the whole thing for you. So I don't have to think
Oh, wow.
about anything. And then after the fact, it tells me where I've, it gamifies it. I get awards because I've pushed the weight up, and it shows me how I've done over the last few months. And it's really motivating for somebody like me. And so those two things kind of combined, really pushed me toward, I can do this. I don't like going to the gym. I doubt many people do, but I'm going to do it, and I'm just going to see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at the population today, what percent of the population do you think could be entrepreneurs?
Population in Salem or in the whole world? Because it's
The U.S. Let's just stick with the U.S.
could be entrepreneurs.
Yeah. They have the grit, they have the vision, whatever it takes to be a successful business owner, from start to, or I guess you could buy a business as well, but like just to take that plunge, roll the dice, jump in,
Yeah.
and be successful.
And be successful. Well, that's the key. Because I would say 100% of people have the capacity to be an entrepreneur,
Okay.
in some shape or form. And that
Even like mentally and stuff like that, you think so?
Well, I think there's plenty of people, like, you watch people that have, there's a social media account with 3 guys with Down syndrome that started a cooking show on,
Okay.
and they're making money. And,
Right.
yeah, of course. So maybe 100% is, when I look at 100%, I look at is there anything standing in your way from a formation of a business and execution of a plan?
Yeah.
No, like U.S. is set up to favor entrepreneurs in that way. But yeah, I recognize that there are certain people that may be mentally incapacitated that may not be able to do that particular thing.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, and again, not every person needs to have every role. They
Right.
don't have to be wired. There's a lot of things that go into starting a business.
Yep.
And if you are convinced that it has to all be on you, then the percentage goes way down. But if you look at
Gotcha.
it from a bigger perspective of you're just one resource in a collective and a collaborative effort to move something forward, then maybe the pressure is not necessarily on, I have to be everything to everyone.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about like mental disabilities or anything like that. I was just talking about, like I've talked to some people and they'll have this conversation and it comes out through what they say that some of the population or some people are just born to be employees.
Sure. So that's the technician piece.
Okay.
Right? So the technician piece in that E-myth that I was talking about, those are the people that just want to go, punch a clock, check off tasks. That's how they feel most useful. They don't want to think about business beyond stepping outside of that time that they're scheduled for.
Okay.
That's how they're wired. That doesn't mean that they can't start a business. That just means that their role in that business is to be the technician and not necessarily the entrepreneur part of it or the manager part. They serve a very important piece of the puzzle that helps with the day-to-day operations and moving things forward. And so are they an entrepreneur? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are they wired the way that you would stereotype a classical entrepreneur to look? Not necessarily, but they're starting a business.
More like a COO role. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like a operations officer.
Yeah. Well, like a developer. That's a classic, like developers love to be in the dark, they get their developer cave and they're just like back there like leave me alone, I'm developing, that kind of thing. That's the stereotype, obviously, but they don't want to think about any of the other details of the business. They have this one thing that they want to do and that's all they want to do. And that's perfect because that's where they bring the value.
Yeah.
And you have to be honest with yourself, where do I bring the value and where do I invite other people into this?
All right, very good. I think that's all the questions that I have. Is there anything you want to add? Anything you want to tell the world or people that are thinking about starting something?
Man, I think, when I first started a business or the idea of a partnership, I had friends around me and, even the restaurant, people that said, this will never work. This will never work in Salem. Bo and Vine particularly had a lot of like, this will never work in Salem because
Really?
the people here just won't embrace this. And so there was a lot of negativity around it. When I started talking about bringing partners on for my first business, long before I moved to Oregon, we had some close friends who had just gone through a bad business partner relationship where there was legal involved and there was the families had been close and that relationship was destroyed, and I think a lot of people hear about that and then, so I'm certainly hearing about it and they're saying never go into a business with partners and never do this and it won't work. And there's a lot of negativity. You have to make an effort to sort of talk yourself into a place sometimes of why you're doing this. Because there's so much, not only just imposter syndrome and I can't and this is hard. And there's also people around you sometimes that they're not trying to necessarily, move you away from your goal. They're just giving you their own personal opinion. Yeah. And sometimes that sort of is a distraction to what you're trying to do. Yep. I am an eternal optimist in a lot of ways, which can get in the way. It allows me to take risks, but I can take risks that I have not calculated out quite as far as I should have. And so sometimes it doesn't work out. But I see through all of that and I don't necessarily pay attention to the negativity all the time. And I would say for anyone that's starting a business, you have to be really honest about who you are, how you're wired. Yep. Take the Enneagram test. It's free. It takes you, 30 minutes online. And, whether you believe in those tests or not or how you feel about them, they're actually pretty good.
You'll probably learn something about yourself.
You'll learn something. Some kind of personality test will kind of help you understand a little bit more of like, well, maybe you're kind of like this.
Yeah.
And then understand where your role is. Like, if you look at the technician, the entrepreneur, the manager, get the E-Myth book and read through that and understand what those three roles require. And start to understand who you are and what your wheelhouse is. And I think that will be a good foundation for understanding what the business will require of you and where you need to find other people to help supplement through partnership or otherwise, employees that will help supplement the things that you are not going to be able to scale on your own.
Yeah.
Or don't see yourself doing for 5 years.
Right.
And if you can get past the negativity, understand who you are, and understand the resources that are needed to do the thing that you're doing, then it's just a matter of chipping away and giving yourself grace every day. Some days you won't get anything done. Some days you'll go backwards. Some days will be frustrating. But just kind of break that problem into small pieces. What can I do today? If it's just all I need, if I send an email today, that is a huge win. If I send an email to this particular person, I've been dreading it. I'm not good at writing emails. I don't like cold calling, whatever it is. If I just do this one thing, and I have 6-8 hours, whatever, to do that one thing, give yourself a win. Go get a cup of coffee, whatever it is that you do to high five yourself, go do that thing, and then focus on the next day. If you do that enough, you will look back and say, I have come a long way. Maybe it's not as fast as you wanted, but you did it at a pace that made sense for you.
Right. Go get a slice of pizza and a glass of wine.
There you go.
Face the board.
Yeah. Get a glass of wine at 10 in the morning.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you for taking time to do this interview.
For sure. Thanks for asking me. I appreciate it.
And thanks everyone that watched all the way to the end. If you like what you've seen, subscribe here on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, subscribe there as well. We also have an Instagram and a TikTok page. But I want to thank everybody for watching. This has been Merchandise Show, where we help you mind your own business.